How do I grow into a really strong Christian that can perhaps do something great in faith for my God? I'm going to talk about something that most Christians know, well, if they read the commentary by F.F. Bruce on the book of Romans, and it's a pretty popular commentary. So you've probably heard it preached on one time or another. I wrote about this in my book, Faith and the Lack of Knowledge, in this chapter. Then I am going to talk about something that is related, and the only way you'd be able to make a parallel is if you had repeatedly placed yourself in circumstances that you were in a lack of knowledge, and you did this on purpose. In the lack of knowledge, you would have felt very weak, insecure, doubtful, maybe fearful, and powerless. Any feeling that a Christian would say weakens them. For those of you who have been in apologetics for a while and are constantly arguing against the rabbis, imams, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and whoever else, it'll be easier for you to grasp this concept taught by the Apostle Paul, who was far more advanced because of the parable used here than anyone could have ever imagined. Remember, when Jesus used parables, he used them because people were hard-hearted and they could not understand him. Parables are what you use when someone is in a lack of knowledge to take them out of it, hopefully when they can't understand it plainly. Here is a famous example that I think is fitting because Paul uses a parable in Romans 11:17 that people are also hard-hearted about, or said another way, they are unconscious of it. And here Jesus is using a parable or a comparison, and the young apostles are also unaware of it, or also not conscious of it. And the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and did not have more than 1/2 loaf in the boat with them. And he was giving them orders to them, saying, "Watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees," or my addition would be rabbis, "and the leaven of Herod." And they began to discuss with one another the fact that they had no bread. And Jesus, aware of this, said unto them, "Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet comprehend or understand? Do you still have your heart hardened?" What you don't know could actually be a sign that you have not been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but you might be deceived and just calling it apathy or something. To you, it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them, it has not been granted. This principle, taught by Paul on growth, is universal. But it is not universal in the sense of saving growth. It does not matter whether you are supporting the rabbis or the Messianic Jews. It only matters that you are engaged. Being engaged, it does not matter how intelligent you are either. You will have noticed that from time to time, there are important questions that you don't have the answers to. As a Christian, you'll see that from time to time, the rabbis will come up with questions that are very perplexing and seem to prove that your faith is a complete lie. And likewise, for those of you on my channel that are supporting the rabbis, you will have noticed that there are, as far as I am aware of, no credible rebuttals to the questions I have brought up that clearly expose the flaws in rabbinical thinking. And I'm not the only one. Dr. Brown and many others are doing this as well. Now the question is, what happens in you when you are exposed to the lack of knowledge? Or said another way, in relation to yeast, what rises up within you when you are exposed to the lack of knowledge, whether you are a Jew or a Christian. Do you break, bend, give up, or grow through it? Paul's parable explains the process as saving knowledge, which is produced in the followers of Christ when exposed to this. I don't know if you have ever heard of the tree that has 40 fruits on it. It is a tree that, because of grafting, has 40 varieties of stone fruit. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's kind of magnificent, isn't it? Grafting is truly amazing. In Romans 11:17, we have something similar. What does God do when you are not producing fruit? Whether you practice Judaism, and that is the context here, or Christianity. And for the sake of this video, we'll define fruit the way Paul often does. It only makes sense. And the main way is this. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. This is the purpose of all of our lives, what we are all moving towards, whether we practice Judaism or Christianity. It is to produce fruit for our God. In Romans 11:17-18, we have a parable, and then a parable within a parable that I believe has been missed. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive, were grafted in among them, and became partaker with them of the rich root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant towards the branches, but if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root who supports you. What Paul is alluding to here, as pointed out by F.F. Bruce in his commentary on Romans, is an ancient process by which you would save an olive tree that had been growing many years but had stopped producing fruit. It would be a waste to chop it down when it could be revived by a process called grafting, in which a wild olive graft would be grafted in, which was not very good at producing olive oil, at least the wild graft or the wild tree. But by the wild olive graft into the naturally cultivated olive tree that had stopped producing olives, it would be provoked, important word, to again produce olives. The amazing thing about this process is that the wild olive could only produce a poor quantity and quality of olive oil on its own. But by this graft could then produce a high quality and quantity of olive oil that neither it could produce on its own, or even the naturally cultivated olive tree could produce either. I hope I explained the process clearly. And there are more fruits than that mentioned in Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 23. For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. Jealousy that provokes to a godly life is also a fruit, I believe. Maybe not, or the precursor of it. As Paul also makes clear in the same chapter of Romans 11, but I am speaking to you who are Gentiles, therefore insofar as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, or I guess I could say the King Noahite apostle, I magnify my ministry, if somehow I may move my own people to jealousy to save some of them. The most lost woman on the face of the earth, Oprah, once said that because God said that he was a jealous God in the Old Testament, that was the reason why she left the church.
This great minister was preaching about how great God was and how omniscient and omnipresent and God is everything. And then he said, and the Lord thy God is a jealous God. And I was, caught up in the rapture of that moment until he said jealous. And something struck me. And I was like, I think about 27 or 28. I was thinking, God is all, God is omnipresent, God is all, and God's also jealous. God is jealous of me. And something about that didn't feel right in my spirit.
But Oprah, if you're in a relationship and there is cheating and unfaithfulness, which is what is implied in that verse, and you did not get jealous, what would that be saying about your feelings towards the object of your affection? God has feelings, Oprah, and maybe you are too advanced to feel jealousy when you are cheated on, but God is not as advanced as you. Jealousy is an important weapon in our fight against the rabbis. But now back to the main reason why I'm doing this video in the first place. Paul says here in verse 11 in the King James, because the King James translates the Greek here the best, I say then, have they stumbled, meaning Israel, that they should fall? God forbid. But rather, through their fall, salvation is come unto the Gentiles, for to provoke them to jealousy. In much the same way a graft provokes growth, jealousy provokes growth too. This is how God pushes the rabbi's buttons, by using you and me. I don't know if you know a person who knows how to push your buttons, and maybe you get pissed off or something. There are people and circumstances that seem to bring the best and the worst out of us, isn't there? Have you figured it out yet? What God does to the members of Judaism, he also does with the members of his church. If you have not noticed, the church is dying and failing to produce the fruit of faithfulness and love. And as hard as God was with the Jewish people, he's about to get as hard, and probably even harder, with the Gentiles. But I digress. I don't know what is in you. You may say the Holy Spirit, and I am not saying that I doubt that. But what happens when God grafts a great argument by Rabbi Singer into your life? What comes out of you? Paranoia or unfaithfulness? Anxiety or patience? What rises up within you? Remember, beware of the leaven of the rabbis. Jesus could answer all their objections. Maybe you cannot. You see, if paranoia and anxiety were what was in you, that will be what comes out of you when they leaven you with their words. And our God does not want these things in us, which is the reason for the Rabbi Singer graft in the first place. These people in your life that you say push your buttons and bring the worst out of you. The why question would be, why is the worst in you in the first place? And why is love, joy, peace, and gentleness not coming out of you? The worst is coming out of you because the worst is in you. And because God can see this, and for the most part we cannot, he grafts circumstances and situations into our lives to get out of us everything that is making us unfruitful in his kingdom. We are not Superman. We cannot see inside somebody's heart, but we are to know who our brothers are by their fruit. You are not evil because you struggle at times to produce fruit. We all struggle. But this is the process as laid out by the Apostle Paul that God uses when his children become unfruitful. He grafts into us to provoke out of us everything that makes us unfruitful. When you feel provoked, you should become very sensitive to the fact that God has identified an area in your life that needs some work, some prayer, and some brothers around you and sisters around you in the faith to help you. And listen to the rabbis or Christians until God provokes everything out of you that makes you unfruitful. That is their purpose.